Radio. Rahim here with Eddie Hearn, New York, your second home these days. We have Canelo and Triple G facing each other for the third time. As you well know in boxing, oftentimes what makes a rubber match exciting is the history with the fighters. These guys have a long history and a tense one, a contentious one. I wonder if I could take you back to the first fight. And the way that fight was set up, it was Triple G was the Mexican-style fighter. It was a 50-50 pick'em fight. Canelo, we didn't know how he was going to come. Was he going to gas around the seventh round and all of this? With that decision being disputed, do you think at that point it changed either fighter, the way they viewed the sport or their participation in it?
No, not really. I mean, I think every fight was close. You know, the first fight and the second fight were close. Everybody feels like they won the fight. Canelo boxed different styles in both of those fights. They were two fight of the year contenders. And there's a lot of history, like you said. And we want to try and dig some of that history up because Canelo, surprisingly, really, is, I say rattled, but really dislikes Gennady Golovkin. And Gennady Golovkin is one of the most pleasant people you can meet face to face, and I don't know him deep enough to know if he's any different behind, but I think Canelo Alvarez feels that he is, and he almost wants him to say what he's seen in interviews. I think that's really what's riled Canelo Alvarez so much. Don't say you haven't got a problem with me and then do an interview and say I'm this and I'm that. Tell me now. Tell me to my face.
Yeah, the reason I stage it that way is because taking a guy's kind of cultural heritage on as a Mexican-style fighter and not being Mexican must rub him.
I don't know if you were in LA for the roundtable, but that was an interesting question that was raised because someone said, you know, Gennady says I'm Mexican style, and Canelo sort of stopped the question there and said, no, he's from Kazakhstan. A lot of fighters use this Mexican style to try and engage the Hispanic fan base. That's what Canelo said. He ain't Mexican. I'm Mexican. I'm Mexican style, true Mexican style. So it's like, you know, I don't know. I mean, there's been a lot said in the past about that. You know, about the decision, about all kinds of other, you know, bits and pieces that have gone back and forward. And hopefully we get to hear more of that today because I want to build that in the build up to this fight.
Right. And so with that said, it's a little bit of a long road because we got 3 fights to talk about, but briefly for each. And with Canelo having had that decision that I would say most people felt went the wrong way, and having the cultural Mexican style being put on Triple G. It seemed in the second fight that he came to prove he could fight Mexican style. And he would stay in the middle of the ring and they would exchange. And then even yet, Triple G all of a sudden has a jab and he's a little bit on the back foot. And yet again, some people would have been okay with the draw, but it was 50-50 on both sides. Half people think Canelo, half people think Triple G. So there's still no satisfaction for for Canelo, having even 2 fights that he, you know, wins on the paper. This time around, what is it that you feel Canelo still has to prove? Like, he seems really wound up about this one.
I don't think he has to prove anything in his career with his resume, but this is more personal, not for resume, but just in terms of what he wants to do to Triple G. Like, he was quite open in the roundtable saying, I want to retire him. I want to stand over him when he's knocked out with satisfaction. That's his words. So that's what he feels going into this fight. I don't think this is about winning a third fight or proving anyone right or wrong. This is about actually his bad intentions towards him. He genuinely wants to hurt this guy. He genuinely wants to knock him out. That's the only thing he's interested. And this fight will be a firefight because Canelo Alvarez will come out as he did in the second fight and fight Mexican style and take it to Gennady Golovkin. Gennady's not going to take a backward step. Both guys will try and go for the knockout in this fight. In my opinion, there is no chance this fight goes 12 rounds this time because I think there's too much bad intentions from Canelo's side. He will not be happy with a points victory, certainly a contentious one. He wants to end this fight inside the distance. So I think you're going to get a very aggressive fight this time around. And I think, to be honest, Rahim, I think the 168 pound will really suit Gennady Golovkin. He's been at 160 for so long. Like in the Murata fight, you could see as you get older, as you continuously make that weight, it's more and more of a struggle. And I think he's going to actually be a lot bigger and stronger in himself at 168. Give him some, say, durability, because we know how tough he is, but even make him a little bit more robust against what will be a vicious onslaught from Canelo Alvarez.
And being at 40 years of age, having a little weight padding to fill out your grown man size doesn't hurt. But before we leave this fight, because you've got a few more big ones coming before the end of the year, the mentality of Canelo is what I'm getting at. This kind of reminds me of a Marquez Pacquiao, you know, where there's these long stories of fights and one guy feels that he's been denied what he should have deserved in the ring and the career he could have had. And it's like a stone in Canelo's shoe. He hasn't really proven, at least I think to most fight fans, yes, the rest of his career, without question. But the Triple G question remains unanswered.
You can never win, really. Like, if he wins this fight by knockout, people will say, oh, yeah, but it was 3 years on or whatever it was. Like, but ultimately, I don't think he's out to ever prove to anyone how good he is. I think this is more about himself. Like, I've never seen him like this before, even in the Saunders fight, where Saunders was actually provoking him, saying bad stuff, like to his face. He was quite calm. Here, when we was in Los Angeles, we came straight up to the head-to-head, and he was like, you know, the line was there, straight over. You know, I've never seen him do that before. And he hates people talking, what he would say, shit about him. And he takes it very personal, what Gennady has said. But still like to see Gennady say it up there.
And what's Canelo said about Gennady behind closed doors?
Wants to punish him, wants to destroy him, wants to end his career on September the 17th.
You know as well as any that boxing is a young man's sport. 40 years is not something we can just disregard. What do you think Triple G, having seen what we've seen since the first fight to now, can bring in the third fight to make a decisive decision?
No, decisive decision is going to be difficult against Canelo Alvarez. The defeat against Bivol is also an interesting dynamic. He's coming off a defeat, only the second of his career, and the last one was a long time ago against Floyd Mayweather. Canelo Alvarez has to bounce back, and there'll be some that will say that maybe he's emotionally or physically a little bit more frail than he would be if he beat Dimitri Bivol in that fight, and I agree. There's others that will say he's more motivated and more vicious to put in a performance than ever. I also agree. So there's a lot of unknowns about what you're going to get from Canelo Alvarez in this fight, emotionally, mentally. I think he's going to come and try and take out the defeat of Dimitri Bivol on Gennady Golovkin. But there was something about Gennady Golovkin. It was almost, the staying calm was almost like a mind game to say, I'm going to let you get rattled here, and I'm fine. It's just sport for me. You know, but deep down, Canelo knows, you don't like me. Say it. I want you to say it. And the more he prods him, I think the more refined Gennady Golovkin will be to say, I'm fine. I'll see you there. I'll let you lose your temper, not me. But we know Gennady Golovkin is also a vicious man, and he'll be wanting to do the damage on Canelo Alvarez.
And Canelo's not the only fighter that'll be coming off a loss before this year is done in a super fight that you'll be in the middle of. Obviously, I'm talking about Joshua and Usyk. That fight having been made now, we've got a firm date. We're back in Saudi. Joshua having found a new trainer, was the date a concern so that he would have enough time with Garcia?
No. It was more about being able to promote a super fight for Saudi Arabia, you know, the time of the press conferences, the multi-city tours of the press conferences. People don't realise that AJ's really been working with Robert Garcia pretty much since December. You know, he's been in full camp with him for a long time. The extra 3 or 4 weeks, will it help? Maybe. I mean, but he was ready to go July 23rd. He's ready to go August 30th. So he's in great shape. Obviously, Robert's buzzing, especially with the Bam Rodriguez performance and victory at the weekend. And everyone's really confident. Press conference on Wednesday in London, the final one there. And then they start, you know, the real deep stuff of the camp, ready to, you know, like you say, provide another super fight for the fans.
And another commonality between the two, it is his second loss. And you've been down this road before. The first one was a huge shock for everybody. Not that this wasn't a surprise, but a more contentious fight. You could see how it would go that way. The mentality of Joshua now, having experienced a loss, come back and avenged it, once again having to do the same. But in this case, I think there is less confidence that he wins the second fight. Most people thought he would beat Ruiz the second time out.
Yeah, I mean, the difference in the two fights is AJ was, on everybody's list, the much better fighter than Andy Ruiz. Okay, Ruiz stopped him. The difference between the two fights and results, and this is in terms of digesting it for AJ, is AJ wasn't really right for the Ruiz fight. He was right for the Usyk fight. He just got beat by the better fighter. With the Ruiz defeat, he could almost say, look, I wasn't really right. I got caught. I didn't recover. I shouldn't have lost, but I did. You can't say I shouldn't have lost against Usyk because you did, and he outboxed you. You came in with the wrong game plan, and the better technical fighter won on the night. So that's been almost more difficult for him to digest because he's had to go away and try and improve and come back with a better game plan. People said when he lost to Ruiz, you shouldn't fight Ruiz again. You should come back, rebuild, etc. Now people say after the Usyk fight, you shouldn't fight Usyk again. This guy has a stellar resume and he only wants to fight the best fighters in the world. This was the only fight he was interested in. But he does have to change. And, he's changing against a pound-for-pound great. It's not like some people just say, he just needs to be more aggressive. He just needs to come on and let his hands go. It's not that easy against a great like Usyk. But certainly he does need to do a lot of those things. And, it's very difficult for him to overcome it. He's in a great place physically and mentally. And we all truly believe he'll win this fight. And he needs to do so for his career.
Well, for Usyk's case, he knows what we're all talking about. He knows what the adjustment Joshua will likely make. What do you make of the adjustment Usyk might make to that? And how dangerous a fight is it really? I know Josh was obviously a man, but this is a huge, dangerous fight.
It's also one of the great heavyweight fights, not just of our generation now, but of all time. When we was out there in Saudi last week, it feels like Rumble in the Jungle, Thriller in Manila. I mean, when you see the scenes in Saudi, it's got that kind of feel to it, and it's a must-win heavyweight fight. You're right, Usyk has the ability to adapt to all kinds of styles, but he doesn't like the physicality. He doesn't like to get hit, particularly to the body. And it's no secret that AJ's got to be more aggressive in the fight, not just more aggressive. Robert Garcia made a good point about, you almost need game plan 1, 2, and 3, and you need to be able to adapt during the fight because Usyk is very, very good and very smart. But he's got to be more aggressive in the fight, and he knows it's a must-win. And I truly believe that he'll knock him out. He'll stop him in this fight because I think he has to. I don't think he can afford to just box him and try and outpoint him. I think he's got to be aggressive, and I think he's got to try and knock him out.
And lastly, obviously, Tyson Fury having retired, which is hard for any of us to believe, and he's already talked about what it might take for him to return. The winner of this fight, it looms heavy.
I don't think Tyson Fury will fight again if Usyk wins. But I think if AJ wins, which we believe he will, then I think you'll see the undisputed fight between those two. But, that's why AJ's taking this fight. He wants to force the undisputed fight. It's always been his dream to be undisputed, and he can't do it without the belts. So he takes this rematch and he gives it everything to try and become a 3-time world champion.
Now, objectively, by your estimation, with these three guys, Usyk, Joshua, Tyson, let's assume he's active, who is the top heavyweight in the division?
You're asking a very biased individual. I'm a big believer that Anthony Joshua is the best heavyweight in the world. But right now, on paper, you can't say it. I actually think with the resume, and not just obviously he's only had a couple of heavyweight fights, but having beaten AJ, having come up undisputed cruiserweight world champion, I get a lot of criticism when I talk about Tyson Fury's resume. The fact is that his big wins have been against Deontay Wilder 3 times, but 1 individual, and Vladimir Klitschko. Well, AJ beat Vladimir Klitschko. He also beat Povetkin, Ruiz, Parker, Dillian White, another fighter that Tyson Fury's beaten. So I put AJ's resume consistently as better than all of them at heavyweight. But on paper, it's a toss-up between Usyk and Fury, number 1 right now. Hopefully that will change August 20th.
I'll be back in a couple days on the camera for Jake Paul and Tommy Fury.
Yes.
And you and Jake have had your row about whether or not he's a legitimate fighter. Is that a legitimate boxing match for him?
I see him as a legitimate fighter. I just don't think he's very good in terms of I'm saying that like he's a fighter, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm saying that like he's a professional fighter. And I'd say that about a lot of professional fighters that aren't very good or certainly aren't good enough to go on and become a world-class fighter. You've been in the game long enough, Rahim, to know you don't just at 24, 25 just go, I think I'll take up boxing and become a world-class fighter. He's improving, he's putting the time in, and I respect that. I just said that he was average as a fighter. Do you know how many average fighters there are? About 95% of the community,
If he beats Tommy Fury, does he best you in that estimation? Is he a better fighter than that?
Tommy Fury's average as well. But I respect everything that he's doing. And if he beats Tommy Fury, he at least beats a boxer. And I'm not saying he can't beat boxers, but let's be honest, he hasn't yet, has he? Tommy Fury's not great, but at least he is a full-time boxer. All right? So that's a good win for his resume, and I respect him. All I say is, he'll never be a world-class fighter. He'll never win a world title, but there's a lot of fighters that won't. You don't deprive them a shot or an opportunity, and I respect him.
And you've got no dog in that fight, so give me an objective call to fight. Who wins?
I suppose I have to go Jake Paul. I don't know. I mean, you start believing the hype of Jake Paul. Like when I was around him for the Taylor Serrano fight, he would actually say to me, like off camera, I'll beat Canelo. And I'm like, I'm looking for a camera. So his belief is, unfoundering. So we'll see.
With the money involved, was that a fight you would make?
Which one?
Canelo and
look,
Paul. I mean, you know how big that fight would be financially.
Yeah, but, when I went to McGregor against Floyd Mayweather, and which was a lot more competitive, because at least Conor McGregor had an amateur background and pedigree. Mm-hmm. It was hard to watch. I mean, and I'm looking at all this money everywhere thinking, wow, genius. So...
You didn't say no.
Listen, if Canelo come to me and said, go on, make the Jake Paul fight, that's my job.
All right.
But I don't think it's at the top of his list.
All right. Well, the man who knows how to make money, and certainly big fights, many to come this year. Can't wait for Joshua, Usyk, and we're here for Canelo. Triple G3, Radio Rahim with Eddie Hearn.